You're paid too much for your role. Starting next pay period, your salary will be cut by 40%. I couldn't even recognize my own reflection. I was preparing to leave after 8 years of service. I smiled and understood. As I left his office, I started counting down. I, 28F, stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, and the woman looking back at me was a stranger. 8 years of my life poured into this company, 8 years of 60-hour weeks, missed dinners, canceled vacations, and this was how it ended. The words still echoed in my head from 20 minutes ago. My manager had called me into his office with that fake sympathetic expression he'd perfected over the years. He'd explained that due to budget constraints, they were restructuring my position. The company valued my contributions, he said, but my salary was simply too high for what I brought to the table. Starting next pay period, I'd be taking a 40% cut. I'd sat there in stunned silence as he outlined how this was actually an opportunity for me to prove my worth all over again. How I should be grateful they weren't letting me go entirely. How other companies were making similar adjustments in this economic climate. But I knew the truth. I'd seen the new hire they'd brought in last month, fresh out of college, eager, and willing to work for peanuts. I'd watched as they slowly started shifting my responsibilities to her under the guise of mentoring. The writing had been on the wall, but I'd been too loyal, too trusting to see it clearly. As I walked back to my desk, I noticed how my coworkers avoided eye contact. Word traveled fast in our open office layout. Some looked sympathetic, others relieved it wasn't them. A few seemed almost satisfied, probably thinking I'd had it too good for too long. I sat down and opened my laptop, but instead of diving into work, I found myself opening a new document. At the top, I typed, "Countdown, 30 days." That's how long I'd give them. 30 days to realize what they were about to lose. You see, what my manager didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just another employee. Over 8 years, I'd become the unofficial backbone of 3 different departments. I knew where every body was buried, every shortcut that kept operations running smoothly, every client relationship that hung by a thread. I'd been the one working weekends to fix the database issues that no one else understood. I'd been the one maintaining relationships with our most difficult clients, the ones who specifically requested to work with me. I'd been the one training every new hire, documenting processes that existed nowhere else, and quietly fixing problems before they became disasters. But they wanted to pay me 40% less? Perfect. They'd get exactly 40% of my effort. Day 1 of my countdown began immediately. When my colleague from accounting called about the quarterly report that was due next week, I told her I'd need to check my new job description first to see if that fell under my reduced responsibilities. When our biggest client called with an urgent request, I politely transferred them to my manager, explaining that I wasn't sure I was authorized to handle such important matters anymore. The database crashed that afternoon, something that happened monthly and that I usually fixed within an hour. This time, I submitted a formal IT ticket and went home at exactly 5 o'clock. Day 3 brought the first signs of panic. My manager stopped by my desk, asking if everything was okay. I assured him everything was fine. I was just being more careful about staying within my new role boundaries. He looked confused but didn't push. Day 7 was when things got interesting. The quarterly report was due in 3 days, and my accounting colleague was in full panic mode. She'd never had to compile it herself. I'd always handled the complex data analysis that fed into it. When she asked for help, I explained that data analysis was probably above my new pay grade and suggested she reach out to someone more senior. Day 10 brought a meeting with HR. They wanted to discuss my recent attitude change. I sat there with my hands folded, explaining that I was simply adjusting my work output to match my new compensation level. I was being fiscally responsible, just like the company. They couldn't argue with that logic. Day 15 was beautiful. Our biggest client, the one responsible for 30% of our revenue, called to complain that their account had been mishandled. Apparently, the new girl had made some critical errors in their project timeline. The client was threatening to walk. My manager begged me to smooth things over, since I'd managed their account for 5 years. I reminded him that client relationship management was surely worth more than my reduced salary could cover. Perhaps someone at the director level should handle such an important client. Day 18 brought the database crash that changed everything. It wasn't the usual monthly hiccup. This was a complete system failure that brought our entire operation to a halt. The IT department was stumped. The external consultants they called in were stumped. Production stopped. Orders couldn't be processed. Clients couldn't access their accounts. I watched from my desk as chaos erupted around me. My manager ran from meeting to meeting, his face growing more panicked by the hour. The new girl was crying at her desk, overwhelmed by responsibilities she wasn't equipped to handle. The accounting department was in shambles without the quarterly report. Day 20 was when my manager finally broke. He appeared at my desk, looking haggard and desperate. He asked if I might be willing to help with the database issue, just this once. I considered his request carefully, then explained that system administration was definitely outside my current pay bracket. Perhaps they should hire a specialist. Day 22 brought the emergency all-hands meeting. Our CEO, who I'd never seen look anything but confident, stood before us explaining that we were facing a potential crisis. Multiple clients were threatening to leave. The database was still down. The quarterly report was late, putting us in violation of several contracts. He announced that they were bringing in a crisis management team and that there might be layoffs if things didn't improve quickly. Day 25 was when I received the call I'd been expecting. My manager's voice was barely above a whisper as he asked if I could come to his office. When I arrived, I found him sitting with the HR director and our department VP. They explained that they'd made a mistake. They'd underestimated my value to the organization. They wanted to discuss reinstating my original salary, plus a raise, if I could help them get through this crisis. I listened patiently as they outlined their offer. Full salary restoration, a 15% increase, a promotion to senior analyst, and a formal apology. All I had to do was fix the database, salvage the client relationships, and get the quarterly report completed. I thanked them for the generous offer and told them I'd need to think about it. Day 28 brought another meeting, this time with even more executives. The crisis management team had determined that I was the only person who could resolve their issues quickly enough to prevent a complete disaster. They were prepared to double my original salary and give me a corner office. I told them I was flattered but still needed time to consider. Day 30 arrived on a Friday. I came in early and found my desk exactly as I'd left it the night before. Around me, the office buzzed with nervous energy. The database was still down. 3 major clients had already jumped ship. The quarterly report was now 2 weeks late. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into my manager's office and placed my resignation letter on his desk. His face went white as he read it. He started talking rapidly about counteroffers, about how they could work something out, about how I was being unreasonable. I let him finish, then explained that I'd already accepted a position with one of their former clients, the big one who'd left on day 15. They'd offered me a 40% increase over my original salary, full remote work, and the title of Director of Operations. But the best part, my new job would involve helping other companies optimize their operations and avoid the kind of crisis his company was currently experiencing. As I cleaned out my desk, my coworkers watched in stunned silence. Some looked angry, others seemed to finally understand what had been happening. The new girl approached me hesitantly, asking if there was anything she should know about the systems I'd been managing. I smiled and told her that all the documentation was in the shared drive, though I wasn't sure how accessible it would be with the database issues they were having. Walking out of that building for the last time felt like shedding a skin I'd outgrown years ago. I'd spent 8 years making myself indispensable, and when they tried to take advantage of that loyalty, I'd shown them exactly how indispensable I really was. Update 1. 3 months later, I was settling into my new role beautifully. The remote work was everything I'd hoped for, and my new team actually valued my expertise. I was working on a fascinating project helping a tech startup optimize their database architecture when my phone rang. It was my former colleague from accounting. She'd gotten my number from someone and was calling to let me know what had happened after I left. The database had stayed down for 2 more weeks after my departure. They'd finally had to hire an emergency consulting firm at triple the cost of my annual salary just to get basic functionality restored. Even then, they'd lost months of optimization work I'd done over the years. The quarterly report fiasco had resulted in contract violations that cost them 2 more major clients. The new girl had quit after a week of trying to handle my old responsibilities. They'd hired 3 people to replace me, and they still couldn't manage everything I'd been doing. But the real kicker? My old manager had been demoted and transferred to a different department. Apparently, upper management had finally realized that his cost-cutting measure had cost them nearly $2 million in lost revenue and emergency consulting fees. Update 2. 6 months post-resignation, I received an unexpected LinkedIn message. It was from the CEO of my former company. He wanted to meet for coffee to discuss a consulting opportunity. Curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed to meet. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. He explained that they were still struggling with the operational issues that had emerged after my departure. They'd hired consultants, brought in new staff, even tried to poach talent from competitors, but nothing was working the way it had when I was there. He offered me a consulting contract, 6 months, remote work, at a rate that would have made my old salary look like pocket change. All I had to do was help them rebuild the systems and processes I'd maintained for 8 years. I listened politely, then explained that my current client load was completely full. However, I knew some excellent consultants who might be available. Their rates started at twice what he'd offered me, and they'd need at least a year to fully understand and rebuild what I'd created. He looked deflated as I stood to leave. As I reached the door, he asked if there was anything that might change my mind. I turned back and smiled. I told him that 8 years ago, a young woman had joined his company full of enthusiasm and loyalty. She'd given everything to that job, sacrificed her personal life, and built systems that kept his company running smoothly. When that woman needed support and recognition, he'd chosen to cut her salary instead. That woman was gone now, I explained. In her place was a successful consultant who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. The look on his face as I walked away was worth every stressful moment of those 30 days. Update 3. A year later, I was thriving. My consulting business had grown beyond anything I'd imagined, with clients across 3 states. I'd helped dozens of companies optimize their operations, and several had offered me permanent positions at salaries that made my old job look like an internship. But the most satisfying moment came when I received a call from a headhunter. A company was looking for a director of operations, and my name had come up as the top candidate. The company. My former employer. Apparently, they'd finally realized they needed someone with my exact skill set and experience. The headhunter explained that they were prepared to offer an exceptional package, nearly triple my old salary, equity options, and complete autonomy over operations. I let her finish her pitch, then asked who would be conducting the interviews. When she mentioned my former manager's name, I couldn't help but laugh. I politely declined the opportunity, explaining that I'd had some negative experiences with their management team in the past. The headhunter pressed, asking if there was anything that might change my mind. I told her that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. That night, I sat in my home office, looking out at the garden I now had time to maintain, and reflected on the journey. A year ago, I'd been an undervalued employee counting down the days until my revenge was complete. Now, I was a successful business owner who'd turned that betrayal into the catalyst for the best career move of my life. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong, it's building something so much better that their opinion stops mattering entirely. The woman in the bathroom mirror that day had been a stranger because she was someone I was about to become, not someone I was leaving behind. She was the version of me who knew her worth and wouldn't accept anything less. And that countdown. It wasn't counting down to their destruction, it was counting down to my liberation.